from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
It is time for another Ask the Pediatrician episode. Thank you to all of you who sent us your fabulous questions on all kinds of things. I've got just the person to answer them.
Typically, kids maybe start reading around 5 or 6 years old, but some kids maybe way earlier. And one way to tell if they're ready is if you're reading to them, they might start finishing your sentences for you so they know it's coming. If you are out and about, they're going to recognize symbols or letters or numbers. And so they might see a street sign and they'll say, oh, there's a 1.
Welcome to Healthy Children, the podcast for parents from the American Academy of Pediatrics. I'm Dr. Edith Bracho Sanchez. I am a pediatrician and a mama figuring it out. This is a judgment-free space where all questions are good questions, and the answers will hopefully be even better. Let's get started. It's Ask Your Questions Day, and we are so lucky to have Dr. Jennifer Shu back, who is the medical editor of Healthy Children. Let's do this. Are you ready, Jennifer?
I'm ready. Thank you, Edith.
All right, let's do it. First question, does measles affect your immune system, Jennifer?
That is an excellent question because, we haven't seen measles around very much in a long time because the vaccination rate has been pretty good. But recently we have seen some outbreaks. And what we know about measles is that it can cause a problem called immune amnesia. So you know how like when your babies are young and they first start daycare or school, they get sick. And then as they get older, they stop getting sick so much anymore. That's because your body has memory with these infections and they don't get sick anymore because they've created some immune responses or antibodies to prevent you from getting sick over and over from some of those same germs. Well, measles causes something called immune amnesia, and it wipes out all that memory. So unfortunately, you or your child or whoever gets a measles infection can get all the other colds and infections over again.
Jennifer, that is such a bummer. I am just remembering when my little guy started daycare and he just kept getting sick and I just kept being like, hold on. He's going to build immunity. His immune system's going to remember this. Next season won't be as bad. And I cannot imagine having to go through that again. So yet another reason to get your MMR vaccine.
Exactly.
Next question. My teen is having trouble falling asleep at night. How can I help?
Oh, that's such a tough problem because teens naturally have a shift in their sleep cycle where they don't tend to get tired at the same time as they did when they were kids. And that shifts so that they feel tired later and they want to sleep in later. And then when you have a time change and the sun is staying out later, that's even harder. And so for teenagers, we want to make sure that they're turning off their devices like screens with any kind of light, especially we call it blue light. Screens can kind of trick your brain into thinking it's still daytime. And that's the same with like artificial light in our home. So one thing you can do is to start making your home very dark and quiet to make your body think, okay, now it's time to go to sleep. Let's turn off the screens. It's great to have some exercise earlier in the day, make that body tired. So I find that a lot of kids who are kind of more sedentary don't fall asleep as well because their bodies just aren't tired. So get that exercise in. Make sure you're eating healthy and don't have caffeine close to bedtime. And then for kids who really still need help, maybe talk to your pediatrician about whether melatonin for a temporary time period might be helpful.
Yeah, and so talk to us about the melatonin, because I think a lot of parents sort of go out and try it on their own. What would you say are things we should think about before starting melatonin, and what's sort of a safe way to go about it?
So I think the main thing to know is that melatonin isn't regulated. It's not considered a medication. And so it's not necessarily the same dose for all different brands, not studied the same way as, say, your ibuprofen or your acetaminophen over-the-counter medicines would be. So if you're going to try it, I would always talk to your pediatrician about it, maybe show them what brand you plan to use. And less is always more. So typically I recommend less than 3 milligrams about half an hour to an hour before bedtime. I've known many kids be able to get by with 1/4 of a milligram or 1/2 of a milligram. So if you have like a 1 milligram gummy, cut that in half or into quarters and give the smallest amount possible and see if it helps.
Yeah, I love that. And the consistency, of course, becomes so important. I don't know about you, but I have so many teens and parents of teens in my practice who say, we tried it this week. It didn't work. All these changes and all these good habits. And it's really about sticking to it, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
All right. This next question, I have to tell you, Jennifer, hits close to home for me. How do I know if my child is ready to read?
Oh, and this is such a fun one. And reading is so great because it opens up new worlds for kids. All of a sudden, they have a new way to communicate and learn. So, some kids can start reading earlier than others. Typically, kids maybe start reading around 5 or 6 years old, but some kids maybe way earlier. And one way to tell if they're ready is if you're reading to them, they might start finishing your sentences for you so they know it's
Yes.
coming. If you are out and about, they're going to recognize symbols or letters or numbers. And so they might see a street sign and they'll say, oh, there's a one. Or they might even recognize logos or pictures because basically letters are the same exact shape, so it's patterns and shapes all put together. So let's say car logos, on the hood of a car. My son used to say, okay, that's a Toyota and that's a Honda and that's a whatever. And so this is all part of recognizing these symbols over and over. And that's learning how to read because then you can see, okay, that's an A, that's a B, that's a C. And then eventually they do start putting them together. Sometimes having audiobooks while they're reading can help support their visual learning as well. So there's,
Wow.
reading is so complex. And the sooner you're seeing your child interested, the better to just kind of foster that interest in reading.
I am so glad and grateful for the person who wrote this in because my little guy's 3.5. And I have to tell you, every day we go to school, he's calling out which car type every single
Oh my
car
gosh,
is.
amazing.
He
Yeah.
is following with his little finger. He's memorized a couple books and he
hmm
pretends to read while going with his little finger over every single word. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I
Yeah.
think he's ready, right? Sounds like ready.
It's worth a try. Absolutely.
I
Fantastic.
love it. So glad we got that question. Now, Jennifer, it's getting warmer. I don't know about you, but inevitably I get a phone call from a patient, friend, or family member about a sunburn this time of year. We all mean to put sunscreen on, and yet we sometimes forget. Remind us the best way to protect kids, and also please give us some ways to actually remember.
Okay. So it's important to put sunscreen on before you go out. So sometimes that means every morning before you leave for school. And then it's important to reapply every couple hours while you're outside, especially if the sunscreen's getting washed off in the pool or at the beach or lake or even by sweat. You can set a timer to remind yourself. There are some sunscreens that change colors after you've been out for a while and it's time to reapply. The easiest thing to do, honestly, is to wear a wide brim hat or a hat that goes all the way around the head that extends 3 inches in every direction, and UPF, which is ultraviolet protection factor clothing. And that can take the place of sunscreen because it just blocks the rays off of the skin.
So, first of all, I love that you said before you leave the house, because if we make it part of our routine, we're more likely to remember, right? Like my brain, I have to be honest, is 10 million different places. Unless I make something part of my routine, forget it. But I've also started putting a small little container of sunscreen in my bag because I can't tell
Exactly.
you the number of times I've been, I thought we were going home and then something looked really fun and then we just sort of went with it. And you're just in these situations where you just don't know if you might be out in the sun longer than you thought you would be, right?
Exactly. And that's why I carry the ginormous bags because you have to have your sunscreen and you have to have your water and you have to have whatever else you might need.
It's the mom
So be
bag.
prepared. It is the
Yeah.
mom bag, the kitchen sink bag is what I like to call it.
I love it. Another parent wrote in, Jennifer, was something I hear and practice a lot. How do I choose a baby formula?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So, in the United States, the FDA or Food and Drug Administration has guidelines for all infant formulas that are made here. So, you can feel confident that the infant formulas here are safe and nutritious and meant for babies. And they may be based on cow's milk protein, goat milk protein, or soy protein. And that's something that either would be a personal preference or something that you work with your pediatrician to decide. And in general, you really want something that contains iron. Back in the day, there were a lot of low iron formulas because there was a thought that maybe too much iron can cause constipation. The amount of iron in formulas really isn't enough to cause constipation, but it is really important to keep your baby from being anemic and making sure your baby grows. So, regular iron formula, don't go for the low iron, and then talk to your pediatrician about which one is best for your baby.
I love it. And another question related to this, are toddler formulas necessary?
So that's a great question. Toddler formulas actually are not regulated by the FDA. And so they basically contain some nutrients such as calcium and phosphorus that are important for growing bones. Those are probably most helpful for kids who aren't getting enough of these nutrients in their diet, say from whole milk or from their solid foods. It's kind of a nice insurance plan or added vitamins that parents may want to choose, or they could choose a multivitamin. But again, not necessary, but it might be, in addition to what your child is already eating. It does not take the place for a full diet, whereas infant formulas and breast milk can be your baby's only diet, at least for the first 6 months.
And I was just talking to a colleague about how sometimes the transition from regular formula or breastfeeding to after the age of 1 go into regular milk and regular food. I think for parents, it's still sort of a little daunting, right? That toddlers are not supposed to be drinking that much milk. How do you help parents to that transition, Jennifer?
That's a really good question. I think sometimes it's easier to ease into whole milk from formula or breast milk by mixing the breast milk or formula with some whole milk to get your baby used to the new taste. And so some babies can go straight from one to the other, and other babies like to mix it in a sippy cup or a bottle where you still have some flavor of the breast milk or the infant formula that they're used to while they're transitioning to whole cow's milk, goat milk, soy milk, whatever the case may be. And then as they get older, they don't need the same volume.
Right.
So one guideline could be milk with meals, water with snacks after your baby turns 1. I like to say 3 servings of calcium a day, and that might be, each serving could be about 8 ounces of milk or 4 ounces of yogurt or 2 ounces of cheese. So you don't really need, 24 ounces of milk if you have some milk and some yogurt and some cheese, or ways to get the calcium into your child to make sure their bones grow.
Yeah, I wish more parents knew that. And of course, this is why we're having this conversation.
Yeah, and I'm glad parents are interested in learning.
Yeah, Jennifer, this was so fun. Let's do it again soon.
Definitely, Anita. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jennifer Shu, for joining us today. And thank you at home for joining us as well. If you like the Healthy Children podcast, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app and help us spread the word. Follow Healthy Children on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Threads at Healthy Children AAP. And be sure to visit healthychildren.org, the parenting website of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Healthy Children is a production of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Our creative team includes
Laura Alessio,
Catherine Beard,
Garrett Brown,
Zach Christman,
Ann Johnsos,
Kathy Jewell,
Claire Keating,
Doug Nagel,
Jackie Ortega,
Susan Stevens Martin,
Mary Claire Walsh,
Hannah Weston.
And our theme music was composed by Doug Nagel. I'm Dr. Edith Bracho Sanchez. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.